basically get started in a second here. So,
Okay. And can we
okay.
also use some clips from this, by the way, because we'll advertise it when it goes out ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd be happy to put some clips, that obviously referencing you and everything and your service and all that and your podcast. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
I can
great,
give you some clips.
excellent.
Video clips or just audio?
Let's try video.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
our marketing guy will want it to be video.
I'm sure he will. Yeah, video is a little bit better for marketing, I think, than.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Okay,
Right
so
then.
hi, this is Will. I have with me today Nancy Slessenger, an entrepreneur and consultant from the UK. She runs Vinehouse Essential Limited, a company that is dedicated to hiring and recruiting for owner managed businesses in the English speaking world. And she's been hiring for practice owners since 1995. So she has
Mm.
about 16 years experience with this sort of thing. Now she does hiring for places for big names, kind of like Perry Marshall, which is pretty much the number one guy at AdWords. And the reason why I chose to interview Nancy is really because I believe her approach to hiring is not only more effective than traditional stuff, it's kind of against the status quo, which is what I like about it, and so that's really important, I think, because if you do things the way that everyone does it, you're probably going to get the results everyone gets. So that's one of the reasons why I had Nancy come on. So I'm glad you're here, Nancy.
Well, thanks, Will. Thanks for that introduction.
You're welcome. We planned some segments together ahead of time, but I wanted to kind of ask you some questions to kind of get in a little bit of backstory first and kind of
Sure.
um, introduce your way of thinking about hiring and before we get into some of that stuff. I was going to ask you, what was your original insight, like that led you from your previous job in the corporate world to becoming a hiring specialist like this?
Well, it's all kind of tied up together, really, because my initial work in the corporate world, I was a production manager in a big electronics factory. And I noticed, I mean, I was like 21, I noticed that we had a lot of people who just weren't very good at their jobs. And I thought, why did we hire them in the first place? And it was like, why would you do that? So I just set myself a little task to see if I could discover what was going on. And I did a really simple thing. I just went round to my colleagues who were also production managers. They were all much older than me and they'd been doing it for years and stuff. And I just said to them, who are your best three people and who are your worst three people? They all knew that because you, as a production manager, it's kind of easy to tell. And I then went to the HR department where I'd worked for a few months, so I kind of knew them. And I said, right, can you give me the application details and paperwork of these people? And I got them all. I put them into two piles: best people, worst people. And I then went through those piles and I looked to see if there are any correlations and what was actually going on. And there were some really interesting things. The most interesting of all was that the people we thought were going to be the best people, in other words, the people who'd done the best in our assessments, actually were quite often the worst people.
Hmm.
And the people who'd only just scraped through the process, like we almost didn't hire them, were often some of the best people. And I thought, well, that means there's something wrong with the process quite clearly,
Right.
if that's what's going on. So I looked into it, and there were a couple of really key things that we were getting wrong. So one of them was a test that we did. So if you were an applicant, you'd be given a pair of tweezers, you'd have a little box full of pins and a wooden block with holes drilled in it. And we'd say to you, take those tweezers and take those little pins and put them into the box using the tweezers. And we thought that was a test of manual dexterity, which was a really important skill for the people we were hiring. And if anyone took too long, that was it, they were out. Well, it turned out the people who were really fast at that often were just not the best people on the production line. And the people who were
Hmm.
really slow were the people who we only just recruited them, but they turned out to be really, really good people. Well, the reason was because the people who were nervous were the ones who took too long, and their hand would be shaking, they'd be really worried and they couldn't get the pin in, and so on. Well, they were the people who were quite shy, not outgoing people, who in fact are exactly the kind of person you want on a production line.
Hmm.
You want someone who takes the job really seriously, who puts in effort, and who, focuses and everything. You don't want people who don't really care, never really get worried about anything, because they get bored really easily. They're your kind of outgoing people. So they'd start off really well, but within a few days they'd be bored, they'd be chatting to people. So they'd not only not be doing a good job themselves, they'd actually be disrupting the people who were doing a good job. So it was like 2 or 3 times as bad as you thought it was. So that was one major thing. Another one was that often, and it's easy for this to happen, you meet someone in an interview, you think they're really nice, you have a lovely chat, you think, oh, they'll get on really well with the team. Actually, that's not what you're hiring people for. You're hiring them for, can they do the job? And a lot of my colleagues would just think, oh yeah, this person's great, they'll be fine. And that was all they do. They didn't ask them any questions that were anything to do with the work and what they could do. Another one was, we quite often hired people whose eyesight wasn't good enough. So you had to be able to see these really thin wires, about half the width of a human hair, or about twice the width of human hair. Half of the people we hired couldn't see them. So they couldn't actually work in my department.
Wow.
I know it sounds really basic, but believe me, if you're listening to this podcast or watching this and you've hired people, I put money on it that you've made one or two of these really basic mistakes. Because it's easy for me to look at it, and see, oh, you've done these things, but when you're in it, you make those mistakes. It's very easily done.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of those mistakes here in a second too. And I was going to ask you just something that kind of came to me. Is this, is it pretty, I guess it's pretty common for somebody who's an expert at seeing these patterns to see these mistakes really pretty obviously? Is it a lot of times does the person hiring think they know what they need and often don't know what they need? Like they prioritize like, oh, I need this manual dexterity test and they need to be really good at this thing, and they don't really see that's not actually the key that makes them good at what they're doing.
Well, I mean, manual dexterity was important. It was just
Right.
that our test didn't actually test for manual dexterity. We thought it did. But so what you need to do is you need to correlate the scores that people get or how they perform during your hiring process with how they actually perform in the job. And of course, if you're an entrepreneur, owner, manager, and you've only got 3 or 4 people, you're hiring your first person, you haven't really got time to go through that and get it wrong twice before you get the right person. Right. Now, we were in a lucky position of, we'd got, I think, about 100 people when I first started there. So we'd been through this process many times. So we had the opportunity to learn from that mistake. Whereas you don't have as much of an opportunity, with the, if you're listening to this, you probably haven't got a huge company where you can try it out on 30 people and see what works.
You gotta be a lot smaller the smarter you, a lot smarter the smaller you are with this kind of stuff.
Yes.
I was gonna ask you, and this is a strange question that's not even on my list of questions, but I actually had two kind of weird, like not on necessarily exactly the subject matter we were talking about doing here, but can this system be used for hiring clients? Like a quasi, obviously there's some dissimilarities between some of those, but you really, when you're working with the client, you're kind of hiring them. So I thought that this might be, have you ever had anybody take some of these approaches and do
definitely.
like that with it?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's really useful because what you do is you look at who are your really good clients and, what is it about them? What do they do that makes them really good clients? What is it that makes the not very good clients really costly and, time consuming and so on, or high maintenance? And then you set up filters. We had one of our clients, he trains acupuncturists. So these trainees are his clients. And he had quite a few problems for a while. Sorry. He had quite a few problems with people who just didn't really do the work, turned up late and all sorts of stuff. And so we just worked out some pretty straightforward filters he could use to make sure that he got people who were the right people. And some of it was really obvious, like if they didn't turn up on time for the interview.
Right.
If you can't even do that, that just isn't a good sign.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably want to talk about that with you more because I'm we have some filters with Sean's thing, and I think I need to make them stronger.
Yeah.
And I almost think this could be applied to dating.
Oh yes. Well, I've helped one of my closest friends find her husband, and yeah, I've helped people on that as well. Yeah, same thing.
I'm going through that dating
Oh,
again. So
yeah.
that's an
It's
equally
it's
difficult thing.
yeah, and it's the same principles. It's working out what you really need. And I think with dating, I know this is slightly off topic, but it
Yeah.
isn't really. It's the thing when we come to talking about mistakes, people often think they know what they need, and actually they don't. You know, one of the reasons I think there's a big problem with dating is when you watch films and TV programs and stuff, the people in them are kind of these stylized, glamorous people. And we all have this idea that, you know, we're going to get a partner who's like one of these people, who's exciting and just amazing in every way. There aren't really that many people like that around. And the people that are like that probably aren't the kind of people you really want to live with.
Right.
You know, you don't want someone who's sort of really unreliable, always attracting lots of other partners and sort of, you know, does all sorts of mad things and is terribly glamorous. Probably it's probably quite exhausting. I'm sure I made quite a lot of those mistakes when I was young, and you know, was attracted to people who were sort of exciting and James Bondy type characters and stuff.
Right.
And actually, I like people to be really reliable, to turn up on time, to be thoughtful. Dare I say it, to remember my birthday, you know, like the sorts of things I like. So I kind of developed a process of looking at finding out what's really important to you. And you do that by looking at who are your close, long-standing friends that you've had and in whose company you enjoy, and who are your friends in spite of your bad characteristics. They love you anyway. You love them in spite of some of their quirkiness or whatever. What is it that's good about those people? Well, let's find someone who is much more like that, because we know that's the kind of person that you get on with really well. So
yeah. Have you noticed that it's like I've noticed with my business partnership with Sean that he's a very steady, easygoing guy who is very process oriented, and I'm very much kind of not like that because I guess I'm more of an entrepreneur type. But I'm like one of the reasons everything is stuck together is because I've had that person with the undercurrent kind of keeping that going, so I can be all over the, like I'm not really all over the place, but I'm.
But what would you be like if he wasn't like that?
Well, I'm like I probably would do a bunch of other things. Like I would probably be doing several things, and I'd probably be doing like I'd have a split focus and all these other different things like that, which is a lot of times what happens with people like me who haven't got somebody like that or haven't learned to adapt a little bit. So I was thinking that that's almost like a complementary thing, that if you have two people like me, it's probably not going to work out. And if you have two people like him, it's probably not going to work out either. That's kind of what the whole like Bill Gates and his partner, sorry, I didn't mean to whack that. Bill Gates and his partner.
Linda.
And also his original business partner with Microsoft is kind of more of a numbers guy, more of an analyst, and he's more of kind of a CEO guy. So I thought there might be a correlation with that. Could you sum up your kind of hiring versus traditional resume hiring? Because really, from what I know about you, that's one of the, I mean, obviously there's several differences, but you actually have a way of testing to see if people know what they're talking about.
Well, okay, so one of the things we have, and I know we'll talk about this more later, is we've got this 1 year guarantee, so that if the new hire doesn't work out for whatever reason, even if they're run over by a bus, within a year of them being hired, we will replace them. Now, that is to force us not to palm our clients off with someone just to kind of give them someone and get the fee in, because if we get it wrong, we know we're going to have to replace them. Now, having said that, we do have to replace about 10% of the people that we hire. So we've got a 90% success rate, but 10% of them, we've had a couple who were poached back by their previous employers, you know, and all sorts of other things. But it makes us go back and look at that process and say, hang on, where did we get this wrong? So we're constantly improving the process every time something goes wrong. And that's a real key. So just going back to the dating thing, I think it's really worth looking at it and saying, okay, why didn't things work out? And how can I make that better next time? You know, how can I improve what I'm doing? So the way we do it is we spend a lot of time with you, first of all, finding out what you really, really need. Now, people will come to us and say, oh, well, I need someone to manage my business, or to be an operations director, or be a top-notch PA, or take over from what I do, or whatever. And I need someone who's this kind of person, or a really well-organized person, or sort of a really cheerful person. And that's not really the best way to go about it. What you need to do is think, what do I need this person to achieve? How would I know they were doing a good job after they've been here 6 months? What would be different? What would my life be like? Now, once you've worked out what you want the person to actually achieve and to do, then you can start thinking about the rest of it. But that's the first thing. Now, we go through what you need, and we come up with between 50 and 70 different criteria. So if you say something to us like, well, I want an A player, we say, well, okay, what do you mean by an A player? It's one of those phrases that I find quite annoying, because it's sort of meaningless.
Right.
You know, do you mean someone who runs meetings really well, or someone who produces lots of results, or someone who's really well organized? What does it mean? And we ask you to be as specific as you possibly can. So give us a situation that would dictate, this is what I mean by an A player. So it's like, 3 things have gone wrong: the roof's leaking, the computers are down, there's a customer coming in 10 minutes. That person keeps really calm, they sort out the phone thing, they get the roof thing, and they arrange somewhere for us to take the client, for example. I mean, I'm just taking that off the top of my head. So another one is we want a top-notch communicator, a brilliant communicator. Well, do you mean someone who can stand in front of 300 people at the drop of a hat and keep them all amused? Do we mean someone who writes emails that are brilliant sales emails? Do we mean someone who can create engaging podcasts? What do we mean by that? So we go through that, and as I'm sure you can imagine now, that takes quite a bit of time, really defining exactly what you mean. Once we've got that, then we can kind of go through and say, well, how can we check that candidates really have this? Okay. Now, the way we do that is we produce an advertisement that is really clear about what we're looking for. So if there are parts of that job that aren't that great, we put them all into the ad. And we know there are going to be bits that you're thinking, I really hate this part of the job, or I really wouldn't want, so I'm not going to put it in the ad because, I don't want to put people off. Actually, there are people who like that bit of the job, astonishingly. I have a colleague in the little charity that I work with, and she takes, we run these little Zoom workshops at the moment. People pay £5 each, and quite often we'll have 200 people on them, but they have to sign up separately to paying. So this poor woman has to take 200 separate payments of £5 or around that, and 200 people signing up, and pick out the 3 people who've actually paid but not signed up, or who've signed up but haven't paid, sort that out. She loves it. It's my idea of a complete nightmare, but she absolutely loves doing it, and she's brilliant at it.
It's crazy.
I know. So you must put those things in the ad, because what you want is a person to look at that ad, and this is Perry Marshall stuff, you know, this is basic Perry Marshall, look at that ad and go, that's me. That is exactly, my name could be written on that ad. I mean, that's how good it should be. You should not be getting hundreds of unsuitable people, though of course you do, but if you're doing that, getting loads of them, then the ad's not right, or of course people aren't reading the ad. So you get them to read that ad, you say, right, if you're interested, fill in this application form. And that application form has questions that are based on those criteria that we've agreed. And Well, just guess what application form fill-in rate we get. You know, how many people fill in the form compared to people apply for the job, would you reckon?
Fill in the form, but don't apply to the job.
Well, if they kind of sent us an email saying I want to apply, but then they don't actually fill in the form, what percentage do you think that would be?
80%.
Mm.
80%?
Yeah. Or 90
Okay.
sometimes.
Or 90. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a good fill-in rate, a good apply rate would be 25, 30, or I mean, 50% would be amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that's because I guess the whole racking the shotgun thing that Perry Marshall talks about. Every time you rack the shotgun, you slice off a bunch with disqualification.
Yeah. And it's also because the job boards where you advertise the jobs, many of them charge by the number of people who click on the advertisement. And they will encourage applicants to apply for anything. It's, oh, apply for 100 jobs with one click of your mouse.
Oh, okay.
And that just encourages the poor applicants to apply for all these jobs. So it's making it worse for everyone. You know, applicants have to apply for 100 jobs before they get one quite often, because they've just applied for the wrong jobs.
Yeah, I guess it's because it's kind of like the way that a lot of traditional advertising companies do.
Yeah.
It's numbers of eyeballs rather than numbers of qualified eyeballs.
Yeah, and we really want one good applicant. We don't really want hundreds. And it's really sad because you get people who are quite clearly good people, but have, you know, you list, you must have this, you must have this, and they haven't got any of it. And it's like, why did you waste your time applying? And I suppose because they're desperate.
Yeah, I see that with a lot of different stuff.
And it's really sad. But, you know, what we don't do generally is go through resumes and CVs, because they are so unreliable. And we get people who have a great resume, but they don't fill out the form properly, or we get people who have a great form, they've done all the stuff we want, but their resume isn't that great. It's very hard to pick out the people you want, and you can't expect anything different because people do a resume that's general for lots and lots of different jobs. So they're going to forget bits or not include bits that we would find really useful, and include loads of stuff that's totally irrelevant as far as we're concerned.
I would imagine resume is so easy to lie on a resume. It's not even funny.
Well, there is, we had someone I met at a conference recently, and she'd had this person take a job through an agency, and half the stuff on her resume was a lie. Half of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I guess you can't. I guess performance-based stuff, it's pretty hard to lie about testing like that.
It's much more difficult. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we have occasionally had situations where someone else has clearly answered some of the questions on the application form, and we found that out at the interview stage or later on. There was one occasion when we didn't do a test we should have done, and the person got the job, and clearly someone else had done the work instead. So we learned our lesson, and we always do that now.
Wow. Okay. I wanted to, because I know you're going to get into what we talked about before about some of the mistakes that are hired. So I wanted to ask you what some of those were, like some of those top mistakes you see when people are trying to hire.
Yeah.
I know you've probably gone over a little bit, but I'd like to hear about
okay,
those.
Well, let's go through some of the key ones. So the first one is, and this is the most fundamental of all, just not being clear about what you actually need. Thinking, oh, well, I need a person who's like this, or who's warm and friendly, or who's well organized, but not actually being really clear. I need someone who can deal with these kinds of conversations if someone phones up and they're upset, or someone who can do this kind of filing, or can set up this kind of project management system, and be totally, utterly clear about it. And here's a special tip for anyone who's listening, who's one of these entrepreneurs. And if you're trying to hire someone to do part of what you do already, which I think is, you know, that's quite likely, isn't it, for the kind of people listening here, just spend a week, as you're going through the week, writing down the stuff you do. Just make a little list of it as you're doing it. You know, like I ordered this, or I sorted out this problem, or I started off this project, or whatever. Just write it down as you're going. And by the end of the week, you'll have a pretty good list of the stuff that it maybe you can delegate to someone, and you can pick out the things. So, but make it really specific Don't make it all general, because that's really useless. So that's the first thing. Be absolutely clear about what you need that person to do for you and to achieve, and how you know that they were good at the job. So that's your first mistake. The second mistake, this is going to sound bad, but it's being a real cheapskate, trying to get someone at a really low price and stuff. I'm afraid you do get what you pay for in the main. And if you want to, hire people on the cheap, I mean, we always put the pay rate in the ad whenever we can. There are some times when it's not appropriate, but most of the time we put that in there. And the reason is, we do not want to waste anyone's time on interviewing someone who wants twice what you're offering. That's just ridiculous, and can be easily avoided. But also, if you're offering a really low salary, we'll put it in there, because, then you'll only get people prepared to accept that wage, and perhaps that will tell you that really you need to be paying more. Or if you are paying a good salary, get it in there. And also, another little tip for everyone, make sure you put in whatever benefits you've got. Those are really important to people now. And particularly if you're an owner manager, an entrepreneur, you could probably be more flexible. Like, you can offer people flexible hours. Maybe you can offer them a bit more vacation time. You might have some extra little benefits, like your service at a cheaper rate or something, that a big company can't offer, because they've got all these policies they have to comply with. But really do some thinking about, what are those extra little things, like you've got this hypnotism business, haven't you? So it may be in your business, you could offer people your service at half the normal rate, or as a perk or something. Who knows? That would be, for some people, that would be great. So that's your next thing. So don't be a cheapskate, because it's quite often better to pay someone a good rate, because you get someone who works at twice the rate and who's much better. So get someone part-time instead of getting a full-time cheap person. It's a much better thing to do. Focusing on the type of person, we've already covered that. Don't focus on that. Focus on what you really need them to do. The next one is creating an advertisement that isn't very well focused on the real job, and is just a sort of trying to sell the job to people. We do our best to, say, yes, this is a great job, but a job is only a great job for the right person. So don't oversell, because that can really lead to you hiring someone who then discovers they don't like the job and then leaves, and then you've wasted a lot of time and money. Be really honest and straightforward. We actually had an ad about, I think it started off with, "Help, can you sort me out?" And it then went on to describe what a mess this person's desk was, and how badly organised they were. And we got all sorts of people who really love helping to sort other people out. It was great.
Interesting.
So yeah, just be, help. I have too many ideas. I can't put them all into practice. I need you to get me focused. Just be honest about it. And the last one is relying on resumes. It's just not possible, because resumes are not a level playing field. So never ever think you can sort candidates and by looking through resumes. It's really difficult, actually impossible thing to do.
I wanted to see what you thought of this idea. I was thinking recently that with hiring clients, and I would imagine hiring somebody as well, it's kind of 80% screening and 20% selling the idea of doing the thing. Is that?
Yeah, that's probably a good. Yeah,
or
might
something,
even be 90,
something inverted like that.
Well, if you go back to the Perry Marshall stuff, it is just a funnel. You've got to get people coming in at the top, and you tweak it. And we do a week. Our first part of any hiring campaign, once it's going, is a week of testing. I mean, occasionally, like just this week, as it happens, we've had a really good candidate in our second day. Well, that is quite unusual, but it happens. But we'll still be tweaking that funnel as we go, tweaking what we've said in the ad and tweaking our form and everything to get it right. I mean, we don't do as much tweaking now as we used to, but if you're starting up, think of it as a funnel, keep tweaking till you get your good people coming in. And it's not getting hundreds of people. You don't want hundreds of people. You want a small number of good people, ideally.
Yeah, quality over quantity. I guess that's always a typical thing.
Always.
I was going to ask you what kind of beliefs that you see in terms of practice owners that would kind of uh, they would have that could lead them to kind of their own demise with this kind of thing. Like I know some of the mistakes can be made, but also just the
Yeah,
ways of thinking about this, because this can be like
yeah.
poison, I guess, for them in terms of getting what they really want.
Well, the sorts of things, like believing it's going to take too long to train anyone else to do what they do, think that they're brilliant at everything and no one else can do it as well as they can, and they can't afford to get the right sort of person. If you start off thinking like that, that isn't going to be terribly helpful. I mean, one of my goals is when I hire people to work for me in my own company is always to find someone who's better than I am at whatever it is I'm hiring them for, which isn't difficult as it turns out. We've got a process that I've deliberately divided into little modules so that each bit, like when we have application forms filled in, we've got this piece of software that sort of sorts it all out. So say we've got 10 applications, all question ones are in a kind of column, all question twos, all question threes, and so on. So the person who's assessing those answers goes through every question one, every question two, every question three, and they evaluate those answers against a really clear set of criteria. So you have to be able to just sit down and concentrate and do that, especially when you get sometimes like 30 or 40 candidates all in one go and you're going through all those application forms. Now, I can do it, but after a while, I sort of lose concentration. I kind of miss something and I don't do it very well. The guy we've got a chap in Australia who does this, and he does do it really well. And because he's in Australia, he does it overnight for us. So an application comes in, and the next day it's all done. Um, and it's done so quickly that we actually don't reject people the next day because they think we haven't looked at their application form because it's happened so quickly. Whereas
Wow.
actually, we've got a really fast, efficient process. And we leave it a day so that, because we used to just get people emailing back saying, you can't have even looked at my application form, you've just rejected me without looking. And it's like, no, we haven't actually. So yeah, we do that now. But I hired him because I wanted someone who was really good at doing that. And all the people who do that are much better at doing that than I am. With the interviewing, I can do the interviewing that we use. We use a very specific tool. I'm actually a pretty good interviewer, but I do occasionally miss out questions because I sort of get kind of really interested in what's going on and I accidentally skip a question. So on my notes, I've got a little yellow sort of highlighted thing where it says, now, sometimes when I'm interviewing a really interesting candidate, I accidentally miss out a question. Do you mind if I just check? And the candidate goes, oh, thanks very much. And they're like, actually, I have missed out a question. Can I just ask this one? Because I know what I'm like. So I've hired people who are better at that than I am. And that's really the way to go about it, is to do that. Then you're never tempted to go back and do it yourself.
Awesome. Okay. And I wanted to kind of in the last part of this, I wanted to kind of do, for you to give kind of a quick DIY lesson
Mm,
about just how to hire somebody if you were using kind of your methods. And then we'll kind of
right.
talk about here in a little bit if somebody wanted you to do it for them. But kind of for now, I
Mm,
wanted to kind of look at the DIY version.
okay. So I think we've already covered quite a lot of this. So this should be
Right.
a bit of a review, a reminder for everyone. So first thing is work out exactly what you need. And you'll probably need to spend 2 or 3 hours doing that. I mean, we can do it in 2 or 3 hours. Actually, if you're doing it yourself, you probably need to spend more like a day on it because you won't have the processes we've got. So go through that and you should end up with between sort of 30 and 50 probably different criteria of what's important to you about the person you're going to hire and their skills, their values, and their behaviors. So the skills are what they're actually able to do. Like, can they use Excel to draw a graph, for example? Can they write an email that gets responses or something? Their values are what they believe, yeah, what's important to them. The behaviors are how they go about doing what they do. The values are why they do it that way. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So in answering the phone, you could be really skilled at answering the phone, but it may be you do it in quite an aggressive way, even though you're saying the right words.
Right.
Or you might be really, yeah, which isn't great. So those are the things you're looking for. Now, once you've got all those in a list, then you go through them and say, how would I know this person actually had those things that I'm looking for? Could I ask them a question? So it might be, have you ever answered the phone to awkward customers, for instance? And if you have, give me an example. What did they do? What did you say? What was the outcome? How did you handle that? So you get a real example of what they did. Or it may be you send them a spreadsheet and say, right, make a graph out of this, to see if they really can turn a spreadsheet into a graph. Sadly, most people can't do that. I'll just warn you now. That's a really good way to get rid of about 99% of your candidates if you need those skills. So you go through every single one of those and work out how you can tell whether the person actually has those skills. Okay. Now, what you then do is you say, well, which of these could I put onto an application form? Because what you need to do is take about 10, 15 of those things, make it as big a range as possible. So, you know, if there are spreadsheets involved, definitely have a task to do with spreadsheets. If there is writing emails concerned, then say, here's a typical email from a client, please compose a response, for example. So you put those things into an application form. The things you can't do that with, you would put those into a telephone interview or a final interview. Now, what you also do with that information, you go down your list of your sort of 30 to 50 requirements, and you create an advertisement that makes it really clear what you're looking for and what that person's going to have to do. And you say, you know, this is what the job involves. So you probably have this kind of experience. You've done these things. You've got these qualifications. And if you have, please apply. And you might even want to say, if you don't have X, Y, Z, please don't apply because I won't be able to take your application forward.
For sure.
It's worth doing that. People will ignore it, but some won't. Okay. So what you then do is you post your advertisement. Well, actually, sorry, I've missed that. I said you need to check the job title and the sort of package that's required for that job. And you can search on a lot of websites, job sites have what the job title should be. You can kind of look that up and it will tell you what's involved. It's really important to get the right job title because sometimes the job title is not what you think it is. It's one of those weird things, you know, EA and PA aren't the same thing, or project manager and, I don't know, operations director. You need to make sure you've got the right one. And you'll find in those, on those websites, you'll find descriptions of what's involved in a, say, a project manager or an operations manager or whatever, and what they mean, or a personal assistant or an executive assistant. Because the person who's applying for the job will be looking for the job title that is the kind of job they want. So if you want to have some weird job title in your company, that's fine. Just do it after you've given them the job.
Right.
Don't advertise it under that because no one will apply.
Right. Okay.
Or they'll all be really weird.
Right.
So do that. You get your candidates, you filter the application forms, their answers, you send them an application form, say, right, fill this in. You check their answers against what you're looking for. I'm afraid you'll be rejecting 90% of them quite easily, of the people who apply. Do let people know. It's really bad just not to respond to people. You know, these are human beings and they may be your customers, if not now, one day. So always be nice to people about rejecting them and give them feedback and say, you know, I was looking for someone who could create graphs in Excel, and unfortunately you weren't able to do that. So I'm afraid we can't, you know, take you forward at this time. Just be really clear about it. So then when you've got people who filled in the application form well and given the answers you want, then I would always do a telephone interview because it's so much easier and quicker to do that, or a Zoom interview, rather than inviting people straight in. We find about half the people fail at that stage. So we get about a 1% pass rate at the application form and then about a 50% at the telephone interview stage. And then those final people, then you get them in for a final interview. and ideally get them to do some of the actual stuff they'll be doing in the job, if at all possible. We had early on, when we were hiring for a client in Australia, he was hiring for a receptionist, veterinary surgeon, and we got the candidate to sit on the reception desk for half an hour. During that time, she sold $500 worth of stuff. This was her interview. He was like, this is amazing. Because in the past, he'd only ever had his nurses on the reception desk while they weren't doing actual veterinary nursing stuff. And guess what? Why do you think veterinary nurses apply to be veterinary nurses?
Not to do selling.
And not to deal with what? Have a guess.
People.
Exactly. So they just like to deal with animals. So what you do is you take, lots of vets do this, you take someone who's distinctly decided to do a job that involves no dealing with people, and you put them on a desk that involves dealing with people. Yeah, so it's not very effective. Yeah, so anyway, this woman did brilliantly just in that half an hour, and that showed she could really do the job. So if you can do anything like that, or a little telephone role play, or getting them to enter stuff into a database, or whatever it is, do it. It will save you so much time, because sometimes candidates that look great turn out not to be able to actually do the job.
Okay,
So
awesome.
You do that, and then if they fit, don't make the decision that instant. Record everything if you can, and review it and measure it against what you want. Now, once you get a candidate who fits, offer them the job as soon as you can, because good candidates go very quickly. Do not sit around thinking, oh, well, I think I'd like to interview 3 other people to compare them. Why? You've got one that fits, offer them the job.
Okay.
And yeah, there you go. Does that give you a kind of...
It does, yeah. I was going to ask you, since we have, well, not a whole lot more time, but I was going to ask you if there's any resource that you're aware of where this could be slightly, I asked you about this earlier, about slightly adapting this for hiring clients as well. Do you think that there's any differences, if any, and what do you think those would be?
Okay, it's exactly the same principles, basically. So, except you've probably got more information, because you've got quite a few clients. You know which ones are the good ones, which ones aren't the good ones. So I would just put them in those 2 piles, and I would just go through, right, what is it? Well, actually what I would do, which I've done before, is work out which ones are costing me money and which ones are making me money. That tends to really focus your attention. And I can guarantee you the ones that are losing you money are losing you much more money than you think they are. So it's because sometimes when we want to get rid of clients, we don't want to do it because we think, oh, I'll lose money. But if you look at it and think, oh, hang on a minute, they're actually costing me money, it's much easier to make that decision. And you feel much happier about not taking people like that on as clients. Because I know, when you're an entrepreneur and you're kind of growing your business, sometimes you're a bit desperate to hang on to clients and get clients, aren't you? So
in the early stages.
Yeah. So if you can have a way of identifying, right, this guy, John, cost me $5,000, I'm never getting another client like that. And here's how I know. So that's what you need to do, is identify what is it that that person has done that costs me all that money. Yeah. So then once you've done that, you can then start creating filters to filter out those people. And what you can also do is say, right, which are the clients that make the most money, or that I like working with the most, or whatever it is. Right, what is it about this client? I mean, we have a lovely client we work with, and one of the key things was they were very good at getting back to us really quickly. And they actually did what we told them to do. So when we said, ask the candidate these questions, they actually did ask them exactly those questions. They did record the interviews. They went through them with us. And yeah, guess what? They got 2 really great candidates who are now employed doing a great job. Actually, might have been 3 people we've hired for them. Yeah. So we know that that kind of behavior works really well. And if people get back to us, like you did, and say, right, here's the situation, this is what I'm going to do, this is my plan, and by the way, can you do this podcast for us? That's actually the kind of behavior we're looking for. So, we know that's the sort of person who's going to be a good client.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, we find that responsiveness is a huge
Yeah,
factor. If you
yeah,
text somebody, they get back to you that day. If they don't, that's probably a bad sign. So
yeah.
different things like that. Okay. Okay. At this point, I guess I just wanted to have you share just a little bit about how they can find out more about you if they're interested in maybe not going through all this trouble themselves. Because this is I would imagine that even with this plan, which is a lot better plan than they would have gotten from anywhere else, I think they probably could become frustrated with it.
Yeah, I won't lie, it is quite a lot of work, even for us doing this is, several days worth of work just in hours terms, and we're pretty good at it, and we've got really good systems and software to help us. So yeah, it is quite a lot of work. But having said that, it's nothing like as much work as dealing with a new employee who actually can't do the job. That's much worse and much more expensive. So if anyone wants to find out more about us, there's our website, which is vinehousehiring.com, or you can just email me, nancy@vinehouse.com. And I'm sure you'll pop these links somewhere for
Hmm.
people, won't you? Yeah, always happy to speak to people. Even if you just wanted a quick chat and a little bit of advice, I'm more than happy to just go through, a couple of things you can do. If you've hired someone and they've turned out to be really bad and you want to know how you can get it right next time, it may be there are just two or three things you could do to reduce the chances of it happening again. You know,
Yeah, it can come down to a couple things on
oh
a lot of
yeah,
things. I think it's just kind of the 80-20 thing. Like, oh, if we just knew about this one thing that they did.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Or there might be some little test you could just add in that would at least filter out people who have some specific issue or something. I will give you a really, really good tip um, that not many people are aware of, and that is there's a particular behavior called external behavior where you blame other people for things instead of taking
Mhm.
responsibility. It's external locus of control. So one question is worth asking virtually every single candidate you're taking forward is tell me about a problem you had or a time when something went wrong or your project didn't deliver or whatever, and you get them to tell you about it, and then you say whose fault was it, and some people will just blame everyone else and they won't say, well, the client wasn't aware of this, but of course I should have reminded them, or I could have done this, and they take responsibility. That is the person, that's the sort of response you want. If anyone starts blaming lots of other people, I would, however good they are on anything else, I wouldn't hire them.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm trying a problem I'm trying to solve right now is we're pretty good at sorting out clients. Higher prices gets rid of a lot of problems,
Mm.
and some other things that we do. But one thing that somebody came in recently
Yeah.
that you know essentially is a classic problem with the business I'm helping Sean with, and that is essentially they think that this, no matter what you tell them, they were told multiple times, this is not a
Yeah.
magic pill. You're going to be working with
Yeah.
Sean is going to be an advisor for you and walk you through this process that we have to
Yeah.
help you do this thing
Mm.
to basically resolve your anxiety, etc. And they essentially think that Sean is going to do it for them, and
Wow.
so they essentially, no matter what you tell them. That being said, I was thinking, is there a question that can be asked?
Oh, I can give you a way of dealing with this.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
because I've
interested in hearing it.
definitely run. Because what I used to do in my previous life was I used to coach so-called difficult people. So they were people who were in a job and just various reasons were causing problems and not doing a good job. And this
That
is a really, really
that
similar
that
situation.
sounds horrible, Nancy.
Well, it was actually really rewarding because when you help someone turn around, it's just so great for them and for the company. And quite often there are things, just a tiny little thing will make all the difference. So this is one of those things. So what you do is instead of telling people, which as you know doesn't work for some people,
Right.
you say to them, okay, Will, here's the process. Now tell me what you understand my responsibilities to be. and you then tell me what you think they are. And then I ask the killer question, which is, and what do you understand your responsibilities to be in this situation?
Hmm. Interesting. That's good because I think that what I realize is every time I thought of ways to screen for this, especially like 4 years ago, um, it was always I had a trouble asking a question in which they wouldn't notice what I was asking because that seems to be the most important thing because this is neutral enough to
Yeah.
where people can reveal their limiting beliefs because I think that's a really good way because a
Mm.
lot of times if you say and what do you expect me to do or something like that if you ask it sort of like in a defensive manner they almost always it's kind of like
Yeah.
the classic questions you ask people on like psychology tests when
Yeah.
they do these various tests they
Yeah.
almost always lie about their answers because they
Yeah.
want to know like what you expect versus what
Yeah.
they can answer and I think your question solves that problem pretty well.
Well, it's this question, I will just warn you now, sometimes you will have to wait a very long time for the answer because people haven't ever thought about it before, some of these people. They've just been handed everything on a plate, so they haven't had any responsibilities. I mean, let me tell you a story. This was a real, well, I would say gobsmacking story to me. So we were working with this woman who reached the kind of pinnacle of where she could go in the company she was in, and she wanted to find a new job. So we helped her and we sent her to our chap who did all the tests and everything. And I saw her a couple of weeks later and I said, "So Jane, how did you get on with Jeff?" And she said, "Well, all he did was like spend a day, I went there and he gave me all these tests to do and he sort of did this analysis of all the tests. And all he did was just tell me the kind of jobs that I was suitable for and then just give me like these 20 advertisements for these jobs." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, that's all he did." And I said to her, "Well, Jane, what do you think your responsibility is in this situation?" I literally had to wait 2 minutes before she answered. And she then said, "Oh, I suppose I better apply for some of them."
Okay.
It was astounding.
Yeah, I think this is a good question to ask
Mm.
because it seems as though I hesitate to say that these people can never be changed. So I'm
Oh, they
interested
can.
in.
Yeah,
I-
yeah.
I'm indicative. I'm just trying to indicate where they stand with that. Is
Mm.
kind of mostly
Well,
what I
I
was
don't think it's a question of changing them.
for
It's a
sure.
question of they have, you see, that woman, I knew her quite well. Now, her parents had bought a flat for her, so she didn't have to buy her own flat. She was living
Okay.
in this flat, and they used to put food in the cupboards for her.
Okay. Yeah.
Are you getting a picture?
Yeah. She's pretty not used to having to
Take
take
responsibility.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't that she couldn't do it, it simply never occurred to her that this was her responsibility. It just wasn't there in her head. And telling her it was, that wouldn't have made the slightest difference. But when you ask it as a question, it's a really different situation and they have to think. And because I knew all this stuff, when my daughter was born, I thought, right, make sure we get this right. So, when she wanted a cat, it was like, okay, what's your responsibility if you have a kitten? What do you have to do? Yeah. What's your responsibility with your homework? What's your responsibility with your pocket money? Well, my responsibility is I give it to you, but what's your responsibility if you want a toy or if you want a book or whatever? So I've kind of done that for her whole life, the poor thing. She's turned out quite well, I would say it myself. But I think as parents, we quite often don't realize some of these things that we can really help our children with by just asking them some of those basic questions. And it's the same with employees, asking them what they understand their responsibilities to be. And I've done this so often with people I've worked with, and they just haven't known that, oh, well, what's your employer's responsibility? and they think, oh, well, pay them on time, give them the training, make sure it's safe and healthy and all that stuff. And what's your responsibility as the employee? And people will just sit there with this kind of blank look on their face. And you have to say, well, do you think you're supposed to actually do the work?
I could almost guess what the potential employee, would respond with that. I just show up to work. I bet that's probably one of the
Some
potential
of them don't
responses.
even have that.
Some of
It
them
doesn't
have.
even, yeah, yeah.
Ooh.
So asking that question and saying, well, you have these objectives. What do you think that means? What do you think these are here for? And people just won't have thought it through because they've just lived in this everything comes to me on a plate lifestyle. So yeah, and as I say, I don't think it's changing, I think it's growing. There's a bit of them that hasn't yet developed, and we're just giving them a little nudge in that direction. And when you see their faces, it is like a revelation to some people. Really
Yeah,
is.
and do you have a guide on your website does that kind of sum up some of the stuff in that PDF or guide like that?
Well, I think we've got the one about dealing with difficult people. I don't know if it's got that question in. I wonder if our questions booklet, we've got various different booklets. I don't know if anyone's got that particular one in. It is one of my all-time favorites. But we've got a few guys. If anyone wants to know more about that, get in touch. I've got a whole book on dealing with difficult people. But yeah, and I think for asking your clients, just getting back to where we started on this, really good idea. When you're starting off a process, when you're working with these therapists, the first thing is ask the client what they think your responsibilities are, and when they've got into that, and then say, and what are your responsibilities?
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has given me a lot to think about with me helping Sean, me helping myself, and all that different stuff. So it gives a lot for you to think about, because most people I guess it isn't like some of the most fundamental like problems with this is somebody approaches this with a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
Like I need to just get somebody, or I need to get a client, or I need to get an employee or something like that. And when you focus like that, it seems to just always give bad results. I mean,
well, you see, I'm not sure. I think, when we're hiring someone, we're thinking, right, I need someone who will do these things. I need these tasks doing, and that is what I'm really, really focusing on. So let me work out how I'm going to do it. And then you work out all the processes that you and I have just talked about and the filters we've described and so on. But the clearer you can be about what it is you're looking for, the more likely you're going to get it. I mean, I've kind of been a bit skeptical about that sometimes, but my daughter and her friend wanted to get a flat in London. And her friend is one of these people who really does this visualizing exactly what she wants stuff. So she visualized, and this was mad, a flat with 2 bathrooms and a garage and a balcony that they would have. And I'm thinking, but you are never going to get anything like that in central London. Guess what flat they've got?
that exact one, I'm guessing.
They have got exactly that. I couldn't believe it when they got that. And this other girl was just like, well, that's what I focused on. And yeah, we got it. It's made me think that sometimes I should have perhaps set my sights a little bit higher on things and really thought, okay, that's what I'm going to go for. And we always advise our clients, when you're looking for a new employee, at least go for what it is you absolutely want. Now, if you're not going to get any people like that, okay, then you can sort of lower your expectations a bit, but at least try.
For sure.
For that, why not?
Yeah, I think it comes down to just being like, what do you want reality to be like, and then essentially go for that. And then most of the time it works out. I mean, in many cases.
Yeah, well, you get like 80-90% of it. Well, that's fine, isn't it? You've got 89% of what you wanted this afternoon.
Right, for sure. Okay, Nancy. Well, the web address is vinehousehiring.com, correct?
That's right.
And then your email is nancy@vinehousehiring.com.
No, it's nancy@vinehouse.com.
nancy@vinehouse.com. Okay, so that's how to get in touch with her. She has the guarantee, and you can kind of have an introductory call with her. And yeah,
Or
so I
just
think
a chat. If you just want a quick chat on, oh, we've had this real problem, I'm more than happy to talk to people about that.
she has a lot of books on her website too about various things like dealing with difficult people and all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff, which I mean is just kind of like stuff you got to know how to do in order to be able to do this kind of stuff. So, okay, well, I really enjoyed our talk, Nancy, and I think you
Same
put out a
here.
really good information here. And I will guess I'll talk to you later.
I hope so. You take care.